Hi, everybody. Welcome to Kindred Skulls. I'm Matt Freese. I'm here with my co-host Nick Olson. Nick, how are you doing today?
Good. Vikings are a fraudulent 3-1, but 3-1 is 3-1, so I'll take it. I'll take my fraudulent wins all the way to a fraudulent Super Bowl. Thank you very much.
Look, even if we're frauds, the Vikings were better than, well, maybe we're not better than the Packers, but we're definitely better than both the Lions and the Saints. I feel pretty definitive in that statement. So even if our wins against them were frauds, we're still probably the better team. So we deserve to be 3-1 after 4 games. You can only beat who you play, right? So yeah.
Exactly.
We're not
And the
what are we,
Packers
the
are a
number 3
fraudulent
seed
team
in
as
the NFC
well.
right now?
Number 2 seed, baby.
Number 2
Number two
seed.
seed. A fraudulent number 2 seed, but number
Yeah.
2 seed nonetheless. So we're top of the division because we have the head-to-head with the Packers. So we edge out a fraudulent Packers team as well. So
Yep. I think I was
it's
looking at it
the NFL.
and I penciled in the Rams beating the 49ers, which did not happen. So I think that's why I thought we were the 3 seed.
There you go. The NFL right now is the Bills, the Chiefs, the Eagles, and everyone else is a fraud. But the Vikings are the top of the frauds right now.
I
So
think I think the Ravens might be a legit team. They need to figure it out on defense. They need to get healthy, but I'm sticking with my preseason
yeah,
Super Bowl pick there.
yeah, get healthy. Yeah. I can see Ravens are so. I mean, Lamar is MVP caliber right now. So if that continues, doesn't matter how injured they are, they're going to. They had a quality loss this week. So, but enough of general NFL talk. This is Kindred Skulls. We're here to talk about the Vikings. So the Vikings had a big win in London. Not quite prime time. I guess for Kirk Cousins it was prime time, but for American viewers it was good morning. We're just getting out of bed. So yeah, it was a big win. Probably a closer win than it needed to be, but ultimately Greg Joseph was able to drill 5 field goals, and Vikings were able to put up a touchdown, and that was enough. After Will Lutz was not able to convert the last-second field goal for 60 yards, so the Vikings were able to walk off winners. It was an interesting game. It feels like the Vikings were the better team the entire way throughout, but then you went and you look back at the stats, and actually, Saints were able to move the ball a lot, on a per-play efficiency, a lot better than the Vikings, and
That
I
that's
think that
kind of
actually kind of matches.
That's kind of interesting to
Go.
me. I didn't realize that because honestly, I felt like the Vikings were a better team. I know we had better field position like the entire game, so I think that made a pretty big difference in terms of the yards per play thing, probably.
Yeah, I mean the Vikings. It was funny. So the Vikings were able to move the ball pretty consistently, but not able to punch it in the red zone.
Mm-hmm.
That's why anytime your kicker has 5 field goals, there's probably something wrong with your red zone offense. So Vikings kind of stalled a lot once they got to the green zone, the red zone, that area where you're in your opponent's field, but you're not quite low red zone scoring position quite yet. So that was part of it. Whereas the Saints were very hot and cold. They had, I think, of their first 5 drives in the first half, they had three and outs, and they had a couple 3 and outs in the second half too. But when they didn't go 3 and out, they drove 15 play drives down the field and punched it in for a touchdown. So that's how they were able to keep it even though the Vikings they won the turnover battle. Dalvin Tomlinson had that strip sack that Harrison Phillips recovered. That was a time when the Vikings weren't able to capitalize. The Vikings, Chris Boyd had that kickoff, forced the fumble on the punt return, and the Vikings were able to get that ball back. So Vikings were able to win on third downs, win on the turnovers, win in time of possession, and still have it look very very close. And I think part of that is really the difference in the run game. This was the first game where I thought the Vikings looked pretty bad blocking up front in the run game, and I'm not sure they were having trouble getting to the second level, which kind of
Mm-hmm.
there weren't really many holes for Dalvin to go through or Madison. So I think that was part of it. Like the Saints, just their front seven played very well. Cam Jordan had a heck of a day. And then the opposite was kind of true for the Saints. Vikings had a lot of problem, especially dealing with pullers when it was power or they ran a lot of I don't know if it was power, it was like duo, but there would be one polar or something, or it was like split zone, but from a duo look, like a man gap split zone. So they did that a lot, and the Vikings failed to fill in on the other side of it, and our end would crash down, and the linebacker wouldn't fit or wouldn't scrape around. So they were able to move the ball really efficiently, throw in everything the Saints do schematically, and then Taysom Hill on top of it. They were able to kind of consistently keep ahead of the chains when they were finally starting to click on offense. And Donatel, we're running a lot of spot drop zones, and they were able to just sort of Andy Dalton was able to find Chris Olave in the hole and like a basic drive, 15 yards downfield a lot. So they were able to kind of keep the chains moving when we didn't stall them right away. So I think ultimately that's kind of why you saw a lot of people call this like a fraudulent win, and that and some controversial penalty calls. The pass interference on Adam Thielen. That set up that end zone, that touchdown drive. What was it? There was a illegal hands to the face on Marshawn Lattimore that
against Jefferson.
That I'm not sure was there. So yeah, it was the Vikings got some help from the refs, and I think both of those calls were pretty quick. I could see the Thielen actually pass interference. I think the broadcast angle didn't give the best, made it look like there was Lattimore interfered with Thielen, but also Thielen interfered with Lattimore. So if anything, they should have just let it play out. But I actually do think Lattimore, but when the ball was in the air, Lattimore was the first to initiate contact, and he didn't give Thielen a fair chance to go up and get it. So I was fine with that one. But yeah, overall, I can see why a lot of fans of the Saints were not happy with the officiating. That's kind of my general thoughts on the game. Do you have any other general notes before we dive into specific?
I think the game came down to, the way it felt for us comes down to the fact that we were scoring field goals to their touchdowns, right? You mentioned that they had a lot of 3 and outs. They had a lot of drives stall pretty quickly, but when they got going and when they were able to stay ahead of the chains on drives, like you said, like a lack of negative plays, if they got a positive play on a drive or a set of downs, it felt like they were going to convert a first down eventually on that set of downs, right? And I think that's kind of where the Vikings defense is at right now. If you can't get into a really comfortable situation in third down, the Vikings are really struggling, a really comfortable defensive situation, I should say. The Vikings are really struggling to prevent that 3, 4, 5 yard gain, on those short third downs. So that's a big concern for me. And it's been the same way, I think, this entire season, right? We've talked consistently about the soft coverage, about the inability to make those kinds of stops. But, kicking 5 field goals, if you can't punch the ball in at all, and we really showed an inability to do that throughout most of the game, then you're really going to struggle to put points on the board. 5 field goals is 5 drives that get into the red zone and only 15 points. You have 2 touchdown drives that basically matches that. That's really what the difference in how this game felt, where it felt like the Vikings were outperforming the Saints for a vast portion of it, but it didn't go that way on the scoreboard. I think early on there were 2 drives where we started after past the 40, and one Kirk threw an interception, and one we were on the fringe of field goal range, and we took a third down sack and ended up having to punt. That's a situation where you're hoping to get points out of both of those drives. If you start, almost just over 50 yards from the end zone, you really should be scoring points on that drive, right? Or if you have 2 drives in a row, you really should score points on one of those. And we kind of let the Saints stick around in the game. It was 7-7, and then we kicked a couple of field goals when we had great opportunity right before half. And I think the miscues are a variety of things, right? I don't think there was a single thing that you can necessarily blame the miscues on. It's some play design, some Kirk Cousins, some Johnny Munt drops a very easy first down, just random players who weren't able to execute. The misconnection on what should have been a touchdown throw between Justin Jefferson and Kirk Cousins, where Kirk's not perfect and Jefferson's not perfect either because he still had an opportunity to make that catch. There's a lot of things that go into that. The one thing I wanted to bring home, though, and I think the ultimate difference in the game was special teams. Right, I mean, our special teams was phenomenal. We did have the missed extra point. I think I can forgive Greg Joseph that when he makes 5 field goals on the day, and just the punt team in general. Obviously, we forced a fumble there. We're limiting returns. We're pinning them deep. Our punt game's great. The kickoff game, I think Kene Nwangwu got us out past the 40-on-1, where he made a guy miss and then took a late hit out of bounds penalty. So he got it past the 25 initially, but we gained yardage on that. anytime we kick off and the opposing team returns it, it seems like it's a win for us. They're stopped, it seems like, before the 20 even. So I think we really won the field position battle, and I think special teams is a big part of that in this game. So that ultimately, I think, made the difference of 3 points, right? And I'm not like the Saints having to kick a 61-yard field goal at the end. I don't think Will Lutz should be expected to make it, but we got lucky that that thing double doinked, right? I don't think it was a couple stressful seconds there when you couldn't see what was happening the way the camera panned.
Yeah, definitely. It was funny. I felt like at the end, Lutz and Greg Joseph were battling for who would actually win Special Teams Player of the Week because one way or another, Lutz had just hit the 60-yarder
Yep.
to tie things up, and then he got a chance to do it again at 61. If he hit both of those, like, man, that is some Vikings-esque luck. But yeah, I mean, special teams is clicking in all phases. Vikings currently lead the league in EPA gained on special teams, which is not something you normally expect. Coverage teams were good. Rager had like a 23-yard punt return, which is good to see, especially coming off the muff punt that he had. You know, he recovered it right away, but you still don't want to see him muff and punt. So seeing the explosiveness from him, from Longwu, and then of course, you know, Greg Joseph being 5 for 5. If he misses any one of those, this game goes to overtime. So that was really encouraging to see. And even the extra point, it was like I'm sure he didn't try to miss it, but it was a little strategic because if he had gone up by 4, then the Saints wouldn't have played for a field goal. They would have played for a touchdown, and probably didn't have enough clock to play for a touchdown anyway. But it colors things. So let's dive into a little bit. I think a lot of the discourse coming out of this game has been Kirk Cousins and to what extent he opens things up for this offense and to what extent he holds the offense back. And I think this was particularly an egregious, there were multiple egregious instances of Kirk taking sort of the easy, safe throw rather than, to use his terminology, getting greedy and going for, like, you know, the jugular with a touchdown throw. So let's dive into that. There was the first one that you already mentioned, which was on a 3rd and 1. Johnny Munt had like a quick out to the flat, and Kirk threw a pass to him, and Thielen was, I think it was Thielen right in the corner, open in the end zone. And
yeah, it was Thielen on the corner, and I just to get ahead of this, I want to say that of the questionable decisions that Kirk made, I think this is the least questionable decision.
I was fine with this one. In
Yeah.
fact, I was not unhappy at all that he went to Munt on this one. I thought that was a perfectly. I mean, Thielen would have been good too, but like on 3rd and 1, take the first down. Live to see another set
take
down.
Take the first down, and that read is structured when you have that high to low. Is if there's nobody or the person running that flat route has a big advantage to throw that ball first, because there's no usually the second level comes open later, and there's no guarantee that that's going to come open. Now on this play, it was a little bit immediate, but the way that read is coached, he should hit that, and you want to take the first down, get the first down and goal, and try to have 4 more downs to punch it in for sure.
So there was that one, and we both kind of agree that one wasn't so bad. There was another one that struck me, which was a boot concept with KJ Osborne sort of in split zone motion across the formation, or it was Jefferson in split zone formation, split zone motion across. So he lines up like in a tight bunch to the offensive line, then works across behind the line of scrimmage into the flat. Kirk does the outside zone action to the boot rollout. And he's got Justin Jefferson in the flat, and then he also has KJ Osborne, who was, it was kind of a high-low stressor, but Osborne, I wasn't really sure what the Saints were doing defensively. It seemed like a bit of a coverage breakdown because they had 2 high safeties, but they were both like right between the hashes. So if it was cover 2, the safeties should be farther apart from each other. If it was cover 3, one of those safeties should have rotated down, or, you know, one of the safeties should have been in the deep third or something. Either way, Osborne kind of got he was able to sort of sprint and just find a dead zone between where the safeties were right in the middle of the field and where the corner was, where he was kind of cheating down on Jefferson in the flat. And Osborne actually puts up his hand because he sees that the safeties are both there. He can probably feel, he probably isn't able to see, but he can probably feel that the corner is probably cheating down a little bit on Jefferson. The corner did a good job. I'm not sure. I think it was Lattimore. Kind of did a good job cheating between the routes. The corner there is supposed to sort of midpoint the routes, and he did a good job. But he wasn't. He wasn't flat-footed because he was kind of in a side shuffle, back side pedal. But Osborne was running full speed on a corner route. Jefferson was in the flat, and there you're supposed to, quarterback is supposed to read, it's a high-low concept. You're
Yeah.
supposed to, go, the cornerback doesn't. And I don't think there's anything wrong by the book with throwing to Jefferson in the flat. Obviously, you want to get the ball to your best playmaker, and if he makes Lattimore miss, I don't think we're having this discussion at all. But that's one of those throws that, it's not bad, but Osborne is so wide open. You kind of just wish Kirk wouldn't be so by the book and would just throw it to Osborne, especially when Osborne throws up the hand and he knows that he's open.
Yeah.
I think Cousins. There's nothing wrong with throwing it to the flat, but that was an easy touchdown to me. If you throw the back pylon, defender isn't getting there, and Osborne is the only one who can go up and get that. So
Yeah, and
honestly,
honestly,
pressure
on that play, you had time to manipulate the corner. Like, he could have given, and I understand that he's on the move, but he could have given a little shoulder fake or something aligned towards Jefferson and then gone to the deep route. Like, he had the time to do that. I think KJ Osborne, with the leverage, because ultimately the way it played out is Lattimore comes down on the flat, and that's part of during Kirk's motion. But the safety is still relating to KJ Osborne on that play. Like, you watch that play, and the safety gets his hips turned and is trying to run to cover KJ Osborne in the corner. And he's not going to make it in time, even if you give a little bit of a fake, right? You don't need to release the ball at the same time that he threw it to Jefferson. You can take an extra step and still throw it over the top to Osborne, and he would have time in that scenario to make that play. So I agree with you on that one. I'd like to see a little bit more creativity from Kirk, because that was like a 0-yard gain, right? That was like Jefferson got stopped on the line of scrimmage on that play. He didn't have the space with the corner's ability to drive on that ball.
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously, most of the time you throw the ball to Jefferson and good things happen after the catch, so it's not like it wasn't a wrong decision. I just feel like there was a better decision. I feel like the elite quarterbacks don't throw that to the flat. The elite quarterbacks see that there's somebody wide open downfield, and they punish the defense for the coverage breakdown.
Yeah.
Not the end of the world, just one play. And I will say, so long as we're harping on Kirk had some really, really impressive throws this game, too. I think everybody immediately thinks of the game winner. I mean, he had for the second week in a row, Kirk Cousins capped off a game-winning drive. And that ball to Justin Jefferson, Kevin O'Connell had a great phrase. We called it a 40-yard handoff. Like, could not have placed it pretty much any more perfectly. Lattimore was in good trail position. It's funny, Lattimore technically gets beat on the route, but like Jefferson immediately stacks him. But it's a tiny window you got to drop that into, and Kirk is able to 40 yards downfield drop it right in the bucket. So that was a really good throw. There was another kind of a flood concept they did, and Adam Thielen was in the intermediate concept coming across the field, so kind of like a deep out. And Cousins was able to hit that deep out from the far hash, which is, people talk about that throw because it's one of the hardest ones in the football because you got to really drive the ball. And so you saw not just pinpoint placement, but also when Cousins is able to step into a throw, he can really throw it on a rope. So it was just a really, really that was to me, that was one of the most impressive throws that I've seen from Cousins in a while. Not just because of the pinpoint accuracy where it hits Thielen's right between the numbers, but it was also right in time, great anticipation, and it was on a rope as well. So you saw not just the accuracy, which we all know Cousins has, but also the arm strength, which I think sometimes can get a little underrated. But he actually has a very good live arm. So. So I say that because my mentions have been like full of people getting very angry with me that I'm like nitpicking these plays from Cousins. Like,
so here's the thing.
Plays, but let's also talk about where he can improve too.
Yeah, here's the thing with Kirk. Like, we've talked about this, and there's been so much conversation spilled about the idea with bringing Kevin O'Connell in is to quote unquote unlock Kirk Cousins, right? We wanted to elevate the level of play of Kirk Cousins because the way Kirk has played throughout his career is that, I would say, third tier of quarterbacks, where he's a very quality starter, right? And you're going to win football games, but he's not one of the top tier guys. He's in the 10 to 15 range of quarterbacks, and I think he's probably more on the 10 side than the 15 side. But at that point, you're just nitpicking, right? He's in the Matt Ryan's like way cooked this year, but he's in that range. He's in the Derek Carr range. He's with that level of quarterbacks. He doesn't have the dynamic playmaking ability that guys in higher tiers have, right? So you were hoping to see with an offensive guru, right, in Kevin O'Connell, somebody who's offensive focused with a strong offensive prowess, that Kirk elevates his game to the next level and becomes, a kind of super a souped up version of who he was, where you're not seeing these questionable decisions or these conservative decisions. You're seeing him take the more aggressive plays when he has those options available, and you're seeing him execute with accuracy to the same level that he's always executed, right? That's always been the hallmark of his game, is how accurate he is as a player, and he makes good decisions as a whole, right? So I think you're still seeing that. I think he's still in the 10 to 15 range in terms of quarterbacks in the NFL, but I think that's not what we were hoping for with bringing in Kevin O'Connell. And I think it's worth noting that we haven't seen him take that next step so far this season, in my opinion.
And here's the thing, like Kirk wants to be more aggressive too. Like he mentioned, he talked about all these plays too in the post-game presser and said like, on the Munt one, he was like, you would like to get greedy, but even if that wasn't the wrong decision, yeah, that was there, and I think that's the right analysis. Like I wasn't wrong. I'm not going to apologize for that one, but yeah, you want explosives more than just first downs, and then he won through the last one we just talked about too, and said, yeah, I could have, maybe it wasn't wrong to go to Jefferson, but Osborne was open, so maybe I'd take that one. Then there was the last one we'll get to, which was the worst one of the three in my opinion. So Cousins wants to be more aggressive. Kevin O'Connell wants Kirk Cousins to be more aggressive. He's talked about that, and we've seen Kirk trying to be more aggressive. I mean, we saw that in the Eagles game. It resulted in some interceptions, but I think ultimately it'll be a good thing if Kirk can kind of get out of his own head and stop throwing it short of the sticks, on third downs, or the second he feels pressure, just like checking it down to whoever's in the flat rather than trying to see who, if there's a blitz, maybe I try and throw it into the blitz downfield. So there's some, in some ways, Kirk as like a check down guy is like an overplayed angle, but at the same time, like there is something to him wanting to throw it shorter, a lower average depth of target. So I think he's going through some reprogramming right now, and I think ultimately it'll be a good thing, even if there are growing pains right now, if Kirk comes out of this on the other side of it being more aggressive. So right now we're talking about those growing pains. Long term, I think Kirk can rewire his synapses so that he actually takes those longer shots. Why don't we dive into the last one, because that was the worst one. It was
Sure.
the Vikings were in the red zone. It was a third down. The Vikings were in a 3-by-1 set. So Justin Jefferson was isolated on the boundary side by himself on Marshawn Lattimore, one-on-one coverage. It was a true press man one-on-one. It might have been zone, but it was a true like press one-on-one setup with the other three receivers from the other side. Thielen on the other side comes from the slot and does like a drag route, so it's kind of there's the low of your high-low stretcher, and Jefferson does. It's a corner route. It has a special name where you inside release and then work your way back, or like a swirl route, I think, where he inside release but gets off it. The Lattimore pulls down on the drag route, and Cousins admitted that he just misread the corner. He thought the corner was sinking. But Jefferson was able to break inside. The safety did not see it. It did not, he had more than just leverage. He had a fair amount of separation from the safety. The cornerback wasn't in a position. So that was, I don't want to call it wide open, because it's wide open in the red zone in the NFL is never going to look wide open. But by NFL red zone standards, that was wide open.
It's NFL open, and that's all Kirk should need to know. Like, it's NFL open. Yeah. Kirk should be able to hit that.
Yeah, and he misread it. He threw it into the flat. The Vikings got stopped on third down and had to kick another field goal. And Cousins himself admitted that was the wrong one. I don't want to belabor it, but when you have three of those instances, maybe two, because we'll give him a mulligan on the Munt one because that one wasn't wrong. But when you see these things happen repeatedly, just a little frustrating. So something for Kirk to work on, and that it sounds like he is working on, and he'll try and continue to reprogram himself so that he can be a little bit more aggressive. Because if he is, he certainly has the arm and the arm talent and the accuracy to be an incredible deep passer. We just want to see him do a little bit more of it. So.
Yeah, and I think
we have Greg Joseph doesn't have to win. We'll have fewer special teams players of the weeks and more Kirk Cousins offensive player of the weeks, because instead of having 5 field goals, we'd have 5 touchdowns. So ultimately, that's what we want.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the upside of this, right? Is if we can fix these issues, if we can solve these problems, the team is actually doing a good job of creating offensive opportunities, right? If we hit on those 2 plays, that's 8 more points, right? You come away with touchdowns instead of field goals, 7 instead of 3, and we win by 11, and the game's not even close, and we're not talking about this way. right? It's, it doesn't feel like a loss that we barely escaped alive. We don't really feel like a fraudulent 3-1. We feel like we're a pretty good football team. We won by 11 points. We cruised to victory kind of most of the game, leading the whole time. So I think that's the upside of this is if as the season goes along, and we're watching this, the team is able to connect on these moving forward. That's going to be a really good thing for the Vikings.
So the other big talking point, I think, coming out of this game, and I've seen a lot of chatter about, is what's going on with Ed Donatel. I thought we fired Mike Zimmer because the defense, gave up more yards than anybody else in the league. We'll set aside for the fact that yards are a terrible way to measure defenses. Like volume stats, volume yards, it has zero correlation, if anything. Sometimes good defenses give up more yards.
But Nick,
Putting that aside, we got rid of Zimmer, we got Ed Donatel. We're trying to stay ahead of the trend, and instead, every color commentator is knocking this shell defense. I don't know what that means, but it's a shell defense, and people think we're doing the same thing every week, and we're not getting any production from our pass rushers. Darius Smith did have a sack this game, but Danielle Hunter is dropping off, and our safeties don't look that great. And so Matt, tell me what's going on. Should we fire Ed Donatel? Is this one experiment all gone wrong, or how do you feel about the defense?
So first of all, no, you're overreacting. We shouldn't fire Ed Donatel week 1. Second of all, we talked about it on this podcast. The defense was probably going to get worse from last year. And, I mean, it's a little bit of a trade-off, right? We got healthy players back. We have legit pass rushers on this team now where we did not last year for the last half of the season. So that is helping improve the team. But, the defensive play calling was going to get worse for the Vikings this year. Mike Zimmer is a top 3 defensive play caller in the NFL. I still believe that. I think that, our third down struggles in particular, if we had Mike Zimmer coaching this team, we'd be getting a hell of a lot more pressure on third down. We'd be affecting the passer a lot more, and it wouldn't seem hopeless when we get to this like 3rd and 5 range or 3rd and 5 or less where it's 3rd and short, and it just feels like the opposing team is going to convert every one of those to me right now. So to that point, does that mean that Ed Donatel isn't a fine defensive coordinator? No. I think I would like to see the defense evolve a little bit as the season moves on. I would like us to blitz more. We really haven't done much going into the blitz bag at all. But at the same time, the secondary and the back 7 coverage players can't get kind of the basics of this defense down. We're still dropping players in coverage. We're still leaving way too much space. I mean, part of it's a general philosophy where I think we're playing way too soft. You saw that kind of the play that allowed the Saints to get into field goal range, right? That's a 24-yard, and I understand it's prevent defense, but that's a 20-something yard play over the middle of the field where our safeties were too deep to make an impact on the ball immediately and prevent a catch from happening. Right? I think that's kind of, and the dig routes that teams are hitting on us are that similar kind of range where the safeties are playing too deep to have an effect on those. I think we need to be able to play those tighter, squeeze those between the linebacker level and the safeties, between the corners and the linebackers on quick routes to the flat or, slants and that sort of thing. We're still having issues. I do think it's been better. We had tighter coverage underneath, particularly in the first half, but then the Saints were able to kind of open up the run game. Obviously, the run game, our insistence on playing too high safeties, and this is what drives the commentators mad, right? Where teams are successfully running the ball, and everybody who's played football, for however long, basically the number one priority of defenses is to stop the running game. I think this season we've kind of seen a league-wide trend away from caring about stopping the running game, right, because of the proliferation of passers and the quarterbacks that are in this league. And the Vikings are probably one of the staunchest examples of we don't rotate a safety down in the box to help in run defense, and that leaves us men down in the box. We've talked about it before on this podcast, how that affects it. Obviously, Dalvin Tomlinson and Harrison Phillips have been playing pretty well, but the front 7 probably had its worst game of the season, to my eyes, against the run, just in terms of how they were able to fit it in this game. So, that is growing pains in the defense. I think they will be able to play tighter as everybody gets more comfortable communicating and in zone. A couple of the newer players or the newer starters, like Cameron Dantzler, Chandon Sullivan, and Jordan Hicks, to me have been the worst offenders of this, right? I think that Harrison Smith can communicate with Eric Kendricks just fine, right? Like I think if they have a mutual understanding of where they're going to be, but we have some newer pieces who aren't used to playing with everybody else in this defense. So I do think that takes time, and I think we did button that up from a coverage aspect. But the balance between coverage and the run is something that we still need to figure out and prevent teams from being able to go on these long drives. And then to get back to the pass rush, like I think that individually, honestly, Zadarius Smith and Daniil Hunter are both playing really well. Like I think if you isolate their matchups against blockers, they're doing really well. The problem is with those coverage issues that I was talking about before, you have this separation where the quarterback's just able to get rid of the ball before they can affect the passer at all. And there has to be ESPN pass rush win rate is 2.5 seconds. It's like pass rushers can't get to the quarterback faster than 2 seconds without being unblocked. Like if there is a man physically in their way, they cannot get there faster than that. So they have to get to the quarterback, but the quarterback's able to get it out in that time frame, which I think they have based on the looseness of our coverage. You're just never going to win as a pass rusher in that case. So that's why we could definitely be doing more just in terms of sending blitz looks. I mean, on third down, we'll walk guys up on the line and that sort of thing to kind of get individual matchups with 5-0 protection or stuff like that. But I think we could do more in terms of sending blitzers to get free blitzers. But in terms of the overall four-man pass rush, I think it'll come around as our coverage gets better is my stance on it right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there are growing pains, especially with learning a defense, because of the communication, because of the checks, because of the calls you have to make. I think you saw that particularly in this game with the run defense. I think I mentioned it before, but every time the Saints motioned a guy over, or they pulled a guard, or they pulled somebody they pulled the Y across the formation on a man blocking run, the linebackers didn't all shift over. Normally it's like, okay, we're just move the fit. Everybody moves one gap over, but Jordan Hicks didn't, and on one occasion, Eric Kendricks didn't, and that's just something you got to have that automatic. You got to be able to fit the run on the fly, and that was kind of. It wasn't really up. The Saints didn't really have a lot of gains up the middle, and if you think about it, like this is the whole year. Like the Packers, when they had their explosives on the ground, it wasn't up the middle. It was on those sweep plays. So there just needs to be a little bit better communication when somebody's pulling across the formation. Linebackers have to know where they're supposed to fit the run. And that's especially important when you are trying to fit the run from too high because you're out gapped. So somebody has to have responsibility for multiple gaps, or you kind of have to, have the linebacker have responsibility, like if it goes here or if it goes there, or you have to have guys who can kind of play over a gap. Dalvin Tomlinson does a really good job of that, of like locking out and containing one gap, but being able to shed and make the play in the gap over. So Tomlinson has been great. I mean, there's a good argument, I think, that Tomlinson has been the best player on the team so far. I think he's certainly been the best player on the defense. So up front, you think of run defense as like, what are your defensive tackles doing? Well, right now the defensive tackles are doing everything they need. There just needs to be a little bit better communication. And that's also true of the coverage. I think there's been some coverage mistakes and breakdowns in communication, but I think you're right. I think a lot of it is they're just learning the system, and so they're just a tick late. It's like a lot of the reason you don't play rookies is because you don't want them thinking on the field. You want it to just be automatic. And there's a reason you see defenses usually take a little bit of a leap forward when it's the second, third year in a system. Same reason you see offenses take a step forward is because you don't have to spend so much time on basic installs, and you can kind of go from bachelor's degrees to PhDs in what you're trying to do. So right now they're just a tick late, and especially when you're doing those spot drop zones, being a tick late is the difference between a route being able to go over the linebacker and the linebacker being able to disrupt the path of the ball. So I think they'll get better. I don't have a problem schematically with what they're trying to do. I think they have an identity on defense, and I think it's a good one. It's where the league wants to be right now. Everybody wants to have sort of, if they don't have Vic Fangio, I think Ed Donatell's the guy they want, and he's installing it in a good way. They're showing too high every snap, and they're forcing quarterbacks to make those post snap reads. We talk about that a lot. But yeah, it's just going to have a little bit of changes. We'll talk a little bit more about Daniil Hunter when we get into tape talk, and in fact, why don't we just dive into it right there?
Yeah.
So people have been. Talk tape talk. Here's our official tape talk. People have been complaining. Where's Daniil Hunter? where he's supposed to be the best player on this team. He broke all those records. He was an All-Pro player, and all of a sudden he comes out and he has like what, one sack on the year. Doesn't seem to be getting much pressure. Matt, what is going on? Is Daniil Hunter not good anymore? Do we need to fire Daniil Hunter in addition to Ed Donatel? Go back to the drawing board. Why aren't we seeing Daniil Hunter's game more often?
No, to me, absolutely not. I honestly like. People have said he's lost a step. People I respect their opinions a lot have said he's lost a little bit of a step. I don't quite see that when I've been watching him. Like there was a play, and he didn't get a pressure on this play. And it was a 3-man rush, right? Where I think the Saints were an empty. They had Latavius Murray as like a tight end kind of player. So he's there as chip help. He kind of disrupts Hunter's path initially. And then Hunter puts this absolutely wicked, very tight, very consistent spin move on Ryan Ramczyk. And he's with level of the quarterback with Andy Dalton. Dalton gets the ball out. I think it was like 3rd and 15. He just threw the ball to the flat. It's, rallied and tackled. But that showed me kind of the athletic explosiveness that I expect from Daniil Hunter, and I've expected for a long time. I think he still has that level of explosiveness. I think he is still getting pressure. I don't think he did as good of a job in the game against the Saints. I think Ryan Ramczyk, who's a very, very good right tackle, is a part of that, right? You're going to play some very good players, and you're not going to get the pressure. We've played Lane Johnson, Penei Sewell, and Ryan Ramczyk. Those are 3 of the best right tackles in the NFL. We primarily rush Hunter from the right side. I mean, we've moved him around a bit more this year. So I think that's also a part of it. Those are the last 3 guys that we've played, right? So just for me, from a consistency level, from looking at his athleticism, from actually seeing him be able to defeat blocks and get pressure and not get home like we talked about because the ball's getting out because we don't have that tight coverage is I think what the issue is for Daniil Hunter. Also, I do think on occasion we're scheming things up for Zadarius Smith over Daniil Hunter. It's not one-sided, right? It's not we're always scheming things up for Smith. It's sometimes we scheme things up for Hunter, sometimes we scheme things up for Smith. But I think Smith has gotten more of the advantageous look so far. Particularly, we prefer to move him inside against guards where it's easier for him to win. And that's something that we talked about coming into the year that the Packers used to love to do with him. And I think he's probably better suited for that role than Daniil Hunter is. But I think if we flip the roles, Daniil Hunter would probably be a little bit more productive than he has been so far.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think Hunter has played well. He probably hasn't played quite as well as he did 2019, last time he was fully healthy, when he looked like an elite pass rusher. But I'd say he's looked every bit as good as he did. And in fact, not that I don't want to over-rely on Pro Football Focus grades, but his grade this year from Pro Football Focus is right in line with where he was in 2018, 2017, 2016. So yeah, maybe he's not his blue chip caliber, first team All Pro level, but he's playing really well. And considering the strength of competition you just mentioned, that's pretty darn good. I've seen maybe not the snap to snap consistency of getting pass rush wins every single time, but I've seen some very, very high quality pass rush wins from a lot of different techniques from Hunter. And he in the Saints game, you mentioned that spin move. He also bull rushed their left tackle right into Andy Dalton, but it was one of those ones where the ball was out right away, so PFF wouldn't chart that as a pressure. ESPN's pass rush win rate wouldn't chart that as a pressure because even though I think it did affect the quarterback, the way that's just based, like, bull rushes don't count as pressure on ESPN's pass rush win rate because it's just do you get past your blocker? And if you push your blocker into the quarterback, you don't get past him. So I don't love that stat especially. And I also think the 2.5 second cutoff is arbitrary, like seconds, but you don't want to register DJ Wanham cleanup sacks, but also like getting pressure before 3 seconds, but not 2.5 seconds is also really valuable. And Hunter doesn't have the world's fastest get off. He might be an all-world athlete, but in terms of snap timing, that's not his game. So that probably disadvantages him a little bit compared to
I also think Hunter doesn't try to have the world's fastest get off. Like, I think he's setting up his unique, almost like a hump move, I think almost like the hump move. He's got this really interesting, or the cross chop rather. He's got a really interesting, unique to Daniil Hunter. You look at Brandon Thorne, who does a lot of offensive and defensive line work. We've referenced him before on this podcast. He has shown this move as a unique Daniil Hunter move that he does, where he's leaping with one foot in the air and swiping with that hand at the same time. It's almost, it looks like he's galloping almost around the corner, I would say, on it.
Think of it as like a yank move, because he'll
Yeah.
make it look like he's ripping you, but then he'll yank you with his outside hand,
Yeah.
and he'll yank you down, and then he'll rip around you.
Yeah, it's like
Nobody else does that, but
it's something I think even casual fans would know it when they see it, just because it's like I don't know, it's a very distinct motion when he comes around the corner and does that. But that move requires him slow playing a little bit and then going very explosive around the corner and kind of beating that tackle. So I think that naturally he's not trying to win with speed around the edge immediately on all of that, even though I think that's something that's probably in his tool bag if he wanted to do it.
some people, I've seen some folks saying like, "Oh, I think the scheme change has been disadvantageous for Hunter." I don't really think Hunter's position has changed. Like before, like go look at what he was doing in Mike Zimmer the last 2 years, or the last 3 years or whatever. Back when he was healthy and playing snaps, like he's lined up at the same spot pretty much.
Yeah.
Whether it's a 5 tech, 7 tech, 9 tech, he was doing all that with Zimmer. So his actual responsibilities haven't really changed that much. It's true that he'll be in a 2-point stance, standing out more than with his hand in the dirt and 3-point stance a little bit more often, but he still has plenty of steps in a 3-point stance. The one thing that I think has probably changed a little bit schematically is they are doing a lot more stunts on pass rushing downs. And the things that stunts do is they don't get you immediate pressure and they don't get you like a clean pass rush win. But I think you're also more likely to get pressure eventually, whether it's like at the 3-second mark. So I think you're trading away the chance of an immediate win for the higher increased likelihood of pressure before like 3 seconds or whatever. So that might color some of his statistics or whatever, or especially with quarterbacks like Andy Dalton or some of the other pocket passers they've played who've gotten rid of the ball quickly. Maybe it hasn't allowed him to stuff the pressure stat sheet, but I don't think it's a scheme change. I don't think it's he isn't good anymore. I think he's still really, really good. I think it's just small sample size and strength of competition. So that's Daniil Hunter. The other thing, tape talk, that we wanted to get to before we talk about the Bears is Kevin O'Connell. We talked about how much the Vikings offense struggled kind of in the green zone, I call it, between the 40 and the 20, or maybe in the high red zone. But in the low red zone, Kevin O'Connell has called just an easy walk-in touchdown 4 straight games. Every single game he's coached for the Minnesota Vikings, he's coached just sort of like an easy, wide open touchdown. So I wanted to talk about how he's able to do that, because I think really clever use of play action and motion in each of the games. And we talked about these, so I won't go into it too much, but I think it's cool to see how it's evolved and how Kevin O'Connell is taking concepts and then he knows how defenses will look at how they beat them last week on tape, and so he'll evolve the scheme to like play 5 moves ahead, as the meme goes. So week 1, the Vikings played the Packers, and they were able to low red zone. They motioned Thielen across the formation, and then there was a double motion with Justin Jefferson fast to the flat. A little bit of play action, and then the way the Packers played it, nobody covered Justin Jefferson into the flat. And even if somebody had carried him, when you're trying to cover somebody all the way across the formation, either somebody in man coverage has to carry him through all that traffic, or you need to have perfect zone handoffs where everybody's just like, oh, okay, now I've got this guy, now I've got that guy, now I've got that guy. And if they had played it like smart and zone and just passed it off and somebody was able to carry him quickly, probably would have been somebody open on one of the other routes underneath because of a coverage breakdown. So smart intentional use of motion there, wound up with Justin Jefferson wide open in the flat. The Eagles game, it was pretty similar. It was also play action, low motion, motion in the low red zone, and another wide receiver wide open in the flat. This time it was Irv Smith, I believe, leaking out into the flat after sort of a shotgun. It wasn't under center, it was shotgun, but they were able to sort of do a play action zone read type look, and then hit Irv Smith kind of leaking out into the flat on a high-low concept. And because they're in the low red zone, that play action, you're biting on the defense's tendency to overplay the run. So similar concept, similar result with somebody wide open in the flat in the low red zone, but different ways to get at it. And then last week, Against the Lions, Lions played such a man-heavy scheme. They did the same thing where I believe it was Justin Jefferson in motion. This time instead of jet motion, right behind the line of scrimmage, it was orbit motion behind the quarterback, behind the running back. So Justin Jefferson comes around and he attracts so much attention because the Lions have been trying to double him all day. Adam Thielen gets wide open in the end zone. Somebody forgets to cover him. So that's when you're using motion in the red zone. Especially when you're motioning up front, your star wide receiver all the way across the formation.
Yep.
You're really wreaking a lot of havoc with the coverage communication and with the ability for somebody to stay on him. And that's kind of what we saw again this week. This week it finally wasn't. They finally handed off that jet motion, but it had been building up to this for weeks.
Yeah.
If they did this week one, they maybe not would have seen the same exact result. I think this time the Saints weren't in a man coverage situation because they one you see it a little bit less in the red zone, but two, you don't want to be in the response to Justin Jefferson jet motion across the formation is okay. We're not going to force our guys to fight through all that traffic. There's too many bodies to get to. Justin Jefferson is always going to have the speed to the edge, and that's the other advantage of jet motion is defense starts flat. The offense has the advantage of somebody can start in motion and carry him across. So you have that running start, and this time they actually hand off the jet sweep. Not just jet motion, but they hand off the jet sweep. Nobody covers him. There's a little bit of a miscommunication breakdown. Lattimore tries to hand it off. You can see him try to hand it off to the safety, but the safety doesn't carry him. And Justin Jefferson walks in untouched into the end zone and hits the gritty in London. So really cool way that Kevin O'Connell has schemed it up. It's really impressive that he's been able to do it literally every game so far. And it's also really cool seeing how each concept builds on each other. And it's really great having like that play sheet in the low red zone and having that confidence that like that was first down on that jet sweep. Like it's not like we had to go back to the well and try three different things. Like they got in that low red zone and they were able to exploit the play action and the motion. They were able to walk it right in. So really impressive stuff from Kevin O'Connell. I think overall he called a really good game. Saints were playing a lot more man coverage than I was expecting, and they were calling a lot of man beaters, and I think they're really well coached on the way they do those rub routes downfield. Like they'll get defenders to run into each other. So it was an impressive game from Kevin O'Connell, and nowhere was he more impressive in the low red zone. So with that, we can kind of
so a couple notes on that, just real quick. The Packers and the Lions made opposite mistakes, right? So that's a cool thing where you see something that you've done in a previous week and then you build on that, right? Because the Packers didn't dedicate enough resources to covering Justin Jefferson. I think they tried to pass it off across the formation because I think they were in man coverage or they had Jair over Justin Jefferson in that case. And whoever the corner was that was supposed to go after him just didn't do it. And the Lions over-dedicated that, right? Where they had three resources and now they dropped Adam Thielen. So seeing that build week after the week does that. It kind of reminds me a little bit of how the Packers would use Devontae Adams in the red zone, how we're using Justin Jefferson as sometimes that decoy and sometimes the player we really want to get open and really want to score. So I think that's been really impressive because the Packers were very effective with that. And just on a final note, I think the offense is a lot more cohesive than what we saw under Clint Kubiak last year, right? I think Clint Kubiak had a lot of good plays and could, come into a game with a nice scheme to get you an open drive score, but I think he couldn't continue that throughout the course of the game. Like he wasn't experienced enough as a play caller to put all those dots together. I think Kevin O'Connell, even lacking experience as a play caller, has been able to do that from the get-go here, which I think is really impressive. So I've just been very happy with those aspects so far.
Yeah, it's been great. Not just the specific play calls, but I think also the overarching game plans coming into games and knowing how to attack defenses. And we talk about the low red zone. Scheming up passing plays, especially in the low red zone, is so tough because there's no vertical threat at all. You're in such a tightly constricted space. But the use of jet motion, I think, is a great way to use that disadvantage for the offense against the defense as well. Because it's so tightly constricted, the jet motion is so much more deadly because there's so much more traffic to work around. So kind of using that and turning it into advantage of the offense is kind of a cool thing. So we got the Bears. We got a normal 1:00 p.m. Sunday a game for Kirk Cousins at home against the Bears. On the one hand, it is a game against the Bears, and they're always able to pull something frisky, surprise us. But at the same time,
it's at Soldier, right?
It's home. I think it's in Minnesota.
Do we have all three divisional home games in the first 5 weeks of the season? That'd be wild. Sorry, we're bad podcasting. We got to look this up.
Yeah, no, it's in Minnesota. The Bears game is. So yeah, the little bit of a divisional advantage right there.
Yeah.
Maybe we pay for it in the last half of the season, but yeah, Bears coming into Minnesota. Kirk Cousins going from London, going from Monday Night Football back to a 1 p.m. slot. Could this be the start of Kirktober? All the ingredients are poised for him to unleash himself. So. How do you feel about the Bears? Obviously, they're struggling. There's a lot of things that they can't quite put together. But at the same time, they beat the 49ers. They are an NFL team with NFL caliber players. So they, maybe you don't put too much stock in that 49ers game given the weather. But how are you feeling about the Bears coming into Minnesota on Sunday?
I think the Bears are a mess. I think that from a franchise perspective, I guess I wouldn't be like fire everybody long term for the Bears because I think very clearly what the new regime did is they came in and said this roster is garbage. We need to start over basically. Potentially with the exception of the quarterback, but the problem with the quarterback, I think, in Justin Fields is twofold. Obviously, Justin Fields has been atrocious so far this season. I think it's fair to say. There's the stat floating around that Cooper Kupp has more catches this year so far than Justin Fields has completions on the season, which is pretty wild. Through 4 weeks, that a single receiver could have more. And Justin Fields has played every game. Obviously, week one kind of throws a wrench into that because that was a mess of a football game. But last week or against the Texans, they ended up winning the game, I believe, and they ended up winning the game. It was 23-20. Justin Fields completed 8 passes. They ran for like 250 yards. So I will say the one thing that concerns me about the Bears is they do seem to have the running game going, and obviously Justin Fields helps in that, in his ability to use his legs to run the football. He is a rushing threat, and you have to account for that. The Vikings' run defense has not been good, so if our offense isn't able to get going, I think the Bears' rushing attack could make them very interesting in this game. That being said, with Justin Fields as a passer, even with how bad our offense is, or our defense has been, I think that his natural desire to hold on to the ball and to try to make the best play or take the biggest shot is going to work against him in our defense. I think what's been successful for other quarterbacks is taking what's quickly available, and Justin Fields has not shown the ability to do that early in his career. That's something that was obviously a question for him at Ohio State. And I think the Bears' offense is actually, my understanding is they are trying to design more of that quicker hitting stuff. Obviously, Luke Getsy comes from the Packers, comes from Aaron Rodgers, who Aaron Rodgers' MO under Matt LaFleur as a passer has been low depth of target 95% of the time. And then he'll lull you to sleep and kill you with deep shots. I don't think Justin Fields has been patient enough to lull defenses to sleep to where they can get to those deep shots, right? He's not taking what's available to him underneath. So that's, and then if you flip to the other side of the ball, look, they shut down the 49ers with Trey Lance in a complete mess of a football game where I don't put much stock in that. And they beat the Houston Texans. Like, I don't know what to tell you. The Texans are one of the few rosters in the NFL that I think are worse than the Bears right now. They just neither of those rosters really has a lot of talent, and I think the Vikings very clearly have a lot more talent. To me, it's an even larger divide than going into the Vikings game, where we talked about, or then going into the Lions game. I apologize. Where we talked about last week how we think there are like 2 NFL caliber defenders on the Lions, right? And I think that kind of showed up in that game. Like the Bears probably have a little bit more talent on defense. Eddie Jackson obviously probably isn't at the Pro Bowl level. Jalen Johnson is pretty good as a corner. But as we saw with Marshawn Lattimore, who's like an all-pro level corner, you still can't put him one-on-one in Justin Jefferson. And I think we finally figured out that if you're going to try to double Justin Jefferson the whole time, hey, Adam Thielen's pretty good, and he's going to get open over against whoever your second best corner on your roster is, or he's going to get open when you leave him in one-on-one coverage. So I'm pretty hopeful that the Vikings will be able to put this away quickly. Obviously, the other question mark for me is the fatigue effects from coming back from London, from having that massive time change. I agree overall with the team's decision to move the bye week back. because I think you just don't want a bye week this early in the season, and we only got a couple extra weeks on it. But still, I think it's a smart decision to move it back. But I do wonder if we'll come out a little sluggish in this game, and that might impact us. Because if the Bears get a lead and they can run the ball and shorten the game, that's the mechanism I see to the Vikings losing. I don't think that'll happen, but that's where I could see it happening.
Yeah, I think you're right. The Vikings are clearly a much more talented team, and that's not a slight against the Bears. I think the Bears, frankly, like the GM from the top, I don't think they're trying this season, especially like they traded away Khalil Mack. They made a lot
Yeah,
of like decisions, like they're spending less money on their salary cap this year than any other team by like a long shot. So they're not. The goal isn't just about this year for the Bears, and that's fine. That's a strategy too. But you could say a lot of the same things about the Lions. The Lions, for the Lions, it isn't just about this year that they need to start adding a lot more talent on a relatively talent-deprived roster, especially on the defense. And the Lions were able to take us down to the very end. So, same thing can happen with the Bears. I think the Vikings should be clearly favored. Even if it were at Soldier Field, I think the Vikings should be clearly favored. But here it's at home, so they are favored by a touchdown. I think they should be favored by more than a touchdown. I won't quite call it a trap game though, because I'm not sure the Vikings are good enough for this to be a trap. So right now, the Vikings kind of have to prove that they're not just a middle class team, that they actually are serious, and not just a fraudulent 3-1, but like a legitimate 3-1. So this would be a good occasion to sort of be in dominant control of this one and come out of it feeling like not just we're 4-1, but we're a 4-1 team with a lot of ability to improve. So yeah, I mean. Defensively, they kind of don't have any horses. Armon Watts, I think, is actually starting for them, old friend. So that probably tells you a lot about the state of their defensive line. Robert Quinn is probably their best defensive lineman, but he's 33 now, and I think he's out of juice. So not very good. They have a lot of rookies starting in the secondary. They got Kyler Gordon, that second-round rookie, who we both actually, I think, liked a lot.
yeah,
But he was a developmental player, and the fact that he's starting, I think, suggests not that he's just really good, but that they don't have anyone else, and they're just going to throw him and do a little bit of a trial by fire. Jalen Johnson as well. If he's out there, he's a very good number one corner. I'm not sure I would trust him to sort of shadow Justin Jefferson and press man, but he's a very good corner. I think though that he might miss the game. He did not participate in practice this week. We'll see if he comes up later in the week, but he injured his quad, so he did not participate at practice. But they also have Jaquan Brisker, that other safety, that other rookie. So they got some youth in the secondary in addition to the I wouldn't call them like veterans because they're not grizzled or anything, but between the rest of the team, and then at the linebacker they have Roquan Smith, but I don't know. They have some names, but it's also really bad. So this is a team that I feel like you could definitely run on. It's also a team that you're not going to see. I think, especially if Jalen Johnson is out, you're not going to see better matchups for Justin Jefferson than this week. So I think they should be able to put up a ton of points, especially at home. Offensively, it's interesting. Justin Fields' rushing threat is a unique threat, but I feel like the way that's especially concerning, I think, to man teams because of the +1 in the run game. You don't want them to run all over you while your defenders have their backs turned to the cornerback and they don't realize it. That's how you can get a lot of explosives. But the Vikings are a zone-heavy team, so that doesn't worry me. But the fact that they have guys who can attack you downfield, Darnell Mooney with his sub 4.3 speed,
mm-hmm.
St. Brown, Equinemius St. Brown, and then is it Byron Pringle, the other guy?
Yep.
So it's like a bunch of like speedsters. They're not gonna break your ankles on an intermediate outbreaking route, but there are a lot of guys who, whether it's downfield or you get them in a tunnel screen and you get them the ball in their hands where they can get going. I think those are the kinds of plays that this defense kind of has to worry a little bit about. So it's in one sense there. I don't think this offense is particularly good. If there were ever a game for like a bounce back game for Daniil Hunter to rack up a bunch of sacks, it would be this one. We saw DJ Wanham get 3 cleanup sacks against the same Bears team with the same Bears quarterback with the same problem of holding on to the ball too long. But the weapons do scare me a little bit just in terms of, we've seen Patrick Peterson get beat vertically and, even though Christian Watson dropped that one and even though I forget the receiver, but the Lions receiver who lost it in the sun, was it Josh Reynolds or whoever?
Yeah.
We've seen Peterson get beat, so that's concerning. And Dantzler himself, he was able to actually win it back for a pass breakup, but Chris Olave beat him. So I mean, this is not a defense that I trust against speedsters running vertically downfield. And if for all Justin Fields' problems, you get him somebody running open downfield, and he throws a beautiful deep ball, very accurate, can put a lot of heat on it if he needs to. So a lot of arm talent. So if there's a way for the Vikings to lose, it would be one of those quick screens where the Vikings. That's one of the places where the scheme of the defense gives up those flats. And if they aren't able to rally and make the tackle against these speedsters, that can be explosive. And I also think they can give up explosives downfield. I don't think the Bears are particularly a defense built to sustain lots of short drives, but I think they are an offense that's built to sustain lots of dink and dunk you down the field. But those kinds of explosives do worry me a little bit. So I think that'll be the question about how do they what do they prioritize? Do they prioritize limiting those passing explosives? Do they give help at all to Peterson and Dancer? Do they let them play off a little bit, or do they worry a little bit about, like you said, the Luke Getsky offense sort of exploiting them in the flats? Because that is kind of, if you look at just where they're allocating bodies on the field, they're playing off coverage and they're kind of giving up those flats a little bit. So It'll be interesting to see how they match up there.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to wrap that up a little bit there, I think that ultimately this is a game where if you're a Vikings fans, you don't want to see the Vikings let the Bears stick around, right? You want to see them kind of get out to a lead early, go for the throat, and prevent them from sticking around, right? Which is kind of what we've seen the past couple weeks. Well, we let the Lions get out to the lead, but we let the Saints stick around, and it came out to a very stressful end. So you like to see them convert those red zone opportunities that they have moving forward. And I think that'll be the most promising sign if we're able to do that.
And if they are, I mean, you don't want to take it for granted, but if they are, they come out of this game 4-1. They do have a tough matchup in Miami, but it sounds like Tua probably won't be there, so maybe it'll be a reunion with Teddy Bridgewater. So yeah, I mean, coming out of your first 5 games, 4-1, that's a pretty good position to be in. So hopefully the Vikings can not fall for the trap.
And if we hit the bye at 4-2, even if we win this week and drop one to Miami, or vice versa, honestly, it would feel a lot worse to lose to the Bears. I'll tell you that much. But 4-2 going into the bye is a very good record. I think you would have absolutely take that if you were asked before the season.
Yeah, totally. So, unless you want to, in homage to Gregg, do the 15 seconds of fantasy. That's all we got for you, folks.
So one last thing I want to bring up, because I think we didn't mention it. Obviously, Lewis Cine had a pretty bad injury during the game. So it's a compound fracture to his lower leg. I believe that probably means he's out for the rest of the season. I haven't seen any updates. I've been pretty busy the past couple days, but I haven't seen anything bad, so surgery went well.
Yeah, it was a successful surgery, and they were able to limit sort of additional damage. But I mean, it was a very, very serious break. They rushed him to the hospital right away, and they had to do surgery right there on site. And I think he's still in London as we record, just because he's recovering from the surgery. But yeah, this was not just this was a compound fracture, breaks in multiple places. So it's not just the sort of thing that you hope he can get back this year. It's hopefully he can get back next year. That's that bad of an injury. So, I don't want to call it career threatening, but at this point, he's going to have to learn how to rewalk. It's going to be a long, long path to recovery ahead for him, which is obviously really disappointing because really disappointing for him. I think he was a tremendous talent, and I think he still has the potential to be a tremendous talent. Doesn't deserve this, especially on a dumb little special teams play. But that's how. I mean, that's the NFL. That's how it goes.
Yep.
So, hopefully, he can make a full recovery and come back to the Vikings and be healthy. It sounded like Kevin O'Connell said in his press conference today that they are hopeful that he'll be back sometime next season. But it sounds like they're going to shut him down for this year. They've already put him on IR. And hopefully he can make a full recovery and eventually come in to replace Harrison Smith as he rides off into the sunset. But yeah, really disappointing. We actually did get to see him in some 3 safety sets on defense this week, so that was fun to see. But unfortunately, we're not going to see much more of it. Man, Vikings have the worst luck with this stuff. First it was Sharif Floyd, then it was Teddy Bridgewater, and now you don't want to put Lewis Cine in that category, but it's that same level of just catastrophic injury that It's hard to see how somebody might come back from this. So he's got just a really unfortunate injury, long road ahead, but we wish him the best.
Yeah, absolutely wishing the best for him. And yeah, like you said, it's really unfortunate. We were starting to see him a little bit. We were hoping that maybe he'd get into the mix a little bit more. We both really liked the draft pick, so I'm still hopeful that he's going to be an impactful player long term. But unfortunately, it's not going to happen this season.
And with that, that's it for us. This is at Kindred Skulls. You can find us on Twitter or YouTube if you just search Kindred Skulls. I'm Nick Olson at Nick Olson NFL. He's Matt Fries at Matt Freeze, at Fries Football. You make it so confusing. How am I supposed to pronounce your Twitter handle differently than your actual last name?
I don't know. It's kind of the decision I made just because, like, if I have to give my name to somebody, over the phone, I will literally just say Fries. I checked into the hotel today. They asked what my last name is. I said Fries. It's spelled that way. I kind of understand the deal.
Is that like German or something? Your ancestors are so disappointed in your heritage.
Yeah, it's German. It's Fries, so it's Germanic, but
the Germans actually pronounce. Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. So you're doing the Ellis Island thing where you just shorten your name and give in to the American pronunciations. So
I was in Switzerland and they pronounced it right. So it's the Americans who are wrong.
There you go. There you go. Okay, he's at Fries Football, even though his last name is Freeze, but it's spelled the same way. Our co-host Gregg Blake, who is not here, but we try and castigate him so he doesn't keep making a habit out of it. He's at You've Been Gregged with 3 G's and a D on Instagram, because that's where he also likes to put out his content, but also on Twitter. You can find him there. That'll be it for us. We'll come at you after the Bears game with a recap and look forward to the Dolphins game after that. In the meantime, goodbye. We love you. Skol Vikings.
Skol Vikings.
Skol, baby.
The first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. And we'll all cheer on behind, and we'll score.